Welcome back to another episode of the yet to be named Economic Development YouTube show. In fact, this is the last episode that one, we're going to have before Thanksgiving, and two, the last episode that's going to have that silly and albeit temporary title. In fact, over the past couple of weeks, several of the tens of viewers that we have commented and sent me notes suggesting a name for this show, one that's a little more permanent, and based on the accoutrement and the aesthetics of the studio, they have suggested, and I have accepted, that henceforth this will be known as the Red Room Economic Development Show. And frankly, I'm not motivated enough to paint the studio, so it's going to stay red for quite some time. So for the very first time, let me welcome you to the Red Room Economic Development Show. You know, coincidentally, I am fresh back, as in last night, from a business prospecting trip to the state of Oklahoma that has a lot of red dirt to go with the Red Room, of course. And, you know, it was absolutely refreshing and wonderful to sort of return to small town America. And small town we'll define as maybe less than 20,000 population. And it is absolutely amazing and astonishing how a lot of these smaller towns have kind of fought their way through the COVID crisis, if you will, how they continue to expand their dreams, their goals, their programming, their plans, how their business recruitment, how their small business development has continued to flourish throughout this. And it's really just a testament to that mindset, that economic development driven mindset, that this is our community and we're here to fight for it and we're going to make it wonderful. And you know, oftentimes in economic development, we go to conferences and we tend to get caught up on what the big communities are doing, those larger EDOs, and how they're recruiting tech companies and say an Amazon distribution center and just these large scale projects that really make the news. But I would contest that in these smaller communities, that individual or that couple of people who run an economic development program are equally vital in that community, in their establishment of a new coffee shop or a new real estate office or any sort of small business is just as vital and just as important as the big guys in the larger communities who bring in those bigger businesses. It's absolutely vital, and it's doing justice and doing beneficial work for those communities. You know, last week on the show, we had a tremendous conversation with Danielle Casey of Albuquerque Economic Development, Inc. And I'll tell you what, I've gotten so many comments from the viewers who've written in and asked me, how to get to Danielle to kind of follow up on some specific things that she mentioned in the show, and maybe to kind of give them some pointers or some tips on how they can kind of take her idea and manifest that in their own communities. So that's just been fantastic. If you haven't seen that show, please go back and check it out on the YouTube channel. Now, following that episode, I also posted an inquiry on our Instagram page, which is simply devcore_advisors, asking for small businesses to contact me who would be willing to come onto the show and talk about how they have been working within the confines of COVID boundaries, if you will, since say March or April of this year. And I got several responses, and we'll kind of go through a few of them that sort of clustered together, but I'll use their actual words as sort of representative of the comments that came in. But to a person, not a single one of them wanted to come onto the program for the sole reason that they didn't want to deal with maybe fallout from their customers or folks in their community, or even more importantly, their local government in their opinions. So they really kind of wanted to stay, in a very gray area, but express their ideas at least anonymously. And maybe at some point they want to come back and talk about this in detail. But a few of those comments from small business owners regarding their COVID response and how they're interacting with COVID. A clothing boutique in the Midwest actually sent me this note. Said, "Our company realizes public health is on the line and are reluctantly willing to restrict our hours, require PPE, and accept the revenues that we had counted on through the holiday season. We counted on the revenues through the holiday season to help catch up from earlier restrictions in 2020 won't be dramatically helpful. However, we're hanging on, but we really don't have a choice." And that sentiment came through from several smaller businesses, from boutiques and small shops and whatnot. Another group, actually I had two photographers contact me and say that they've pretty much been decimated by this. We've been struggling, as the nature of our business is to get people together and take pictures. Family photos, high school senior photos, and general photography has felt a distinct impact from the fear of COVID-19. And this last one is a little more interesting and certainly more defiant. And this came from a local fitness center or gym. We will not be participating in any restrictions. Instead, we will allow our clients to determine if they patronize our facility based on their own discretion. We've invested our life savings, time, sweat, and energy in establishing the gym, and there is nothing constitutional about local government restricting our operation. We've received 4 citations and fines for our stance on the matter and will continue to operate as we always have. And then he goes into some specifics about an incredibly limited faction or percentage of Americans have really encountered COVID on an individual level. I think everybody at some point or at some level has been touched by COVID, whether it be a relative, a coworker, someone at your child's school, something along those lines. I think everyone's somehow been affected or near COVID. But this individual sort of makes the case that it really is a small percentage of that 320 million people that make up the United States. All the while, millions of Americans are struggling financially and have faced job losses due to fear. So I'm not here to sort of set the standard on this or even come up with a ruling. I'm simply sharing what the small business community is sort of bringing to the table and what they're feeling at this time. And oftentimes as economic developers, we talk about the global community, or on the news we see the global, the national impact or whatnot. And we sort of allude to this is what small businesses are dealing with. But I think it's a completely different story to actually hear small businesses in their own words talk about what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. And, I started my career as a small business consultant. I had over 800 clients that were startup businesses, and small business owners have been relentless, and they're becoming more relentless and restless. Hell, they've always been restless. Like I said, I've worked with over 800 startups, and entrepreneurship is a tense endeavor, even in great economic times. Even when everybody's healthy, entrepreneurship is a tense endeavor. So I recognize and realize the stress that they're dealing with, and I appreciate their perspectives. They want to be safe, they want to be cognizant of public health, but at the same time, they want to keep their employees engaged and employed and keep their economic engine rolling, as well as their standard of living. And the reality is, like it or not, America stands and falls based on the economy. Again, I'm not here to make a case for either one of these things, but if COVID happened, thousands of years ago when we relied on barter and procured our own food and whatnot, it might be an easier situation, aside from technology, of course. But it's not. Businesses are very complicated, and many cannot exist without that face-to-face interaction or actually encountering their customers, and they really just can't operate in a vacuum, sealed off from the physical presence of their customers. Regardless, business owners are frankly losing their shit right now, and you can't really blame them on either side. It really is a great debate over how business should conduct or not conduct itself, and it's really an exercise in asking business, asking America, to split its DNA and choose a path. See, Americans, we're built on this country. Not just Americans, but this country was built on 2 diametrically opposed but irreversibly ingrained values, and one being empathy and concern. I think as a whole, Americans are incredibly generous. We're incredibly philanthropic. We want to help those people around us. We want to help other people. Heck, empathy and concern, you look at the Statue of Liberty and the words, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." Now, on the complete other hand, America is equally steeped in defiance and a rich history of telling government to squarely and briskly go F itself. And we need look no further than the Boston Tea Party or the Revolutionary War for those examples. But whatever I say tonight in the confines of the cozy Red Room studio really isn't going to change anybody's mind. How you feel on this matter really comes down to how it's impacting you directly. And there are people who've lost loved ones, and they're willing to shut every single thing around them down because they don't want anybody else to experience that. Now, those who haven't experienced that are purely thinking about the economics and keeping people in work, keeping money coming in the door, keeping their economy going, and really putting food on their tables and the tables of their employees as well. So it really is two diametrically opposed viewpoints that are currently in the same pot, if you will. And I really don't know that there's one that's right or wrong. But I did want to share that feedback that I got from my Instagram post and request last week, because I think that's a duty. I throw something out there, I want to report that back to you. And finally, because this is going to be a short video, because we're almost on Thanksgiving Eve. This is the Tuesday before the Thursday of Thanksgiving. We're on the cusp of Thanksgiving, and 2020 has been a shitstorm. We've got politics. We've got politics about COVID. We've got the response to COVID, which we just talked about. George Floyd, the death of Kobe Bryant, somebody from Deal or No Deal married and had a baby with a fake monarch. Apparently that was a news story. Danielle Bergoli went in and out of rehab, and hopefully she's doing okay. And whatever crisis is occurring in Britney Spears' conservatorship battle is still brewing. So, it's been a shitstorm, not to mention, the higher level important stuff. There's all that other crap that sort of clouds everyone's judgment and mind and thought processes as well. But that said, in the name of mental health, I think it's important to contemplate the positives of 2020. And despite all that negative stuff that's happened, there has to be some positives that have occurred in 2020. I've asked our audience a number of times, purely speaking about economic development, how have you spent this COVID period, or this downtime, if you will? And the resounding response has been business has slowed down, but we've been able to use this time to really focus on rainy day type items. We've spruced up the website. We caught up with our BRE programming. We've been doing BRE through Zoom, and that's been kind of cool. And someday we're going to do an episode of the show that really talks about business retention programs, specifically those business retention visits, and how to keep your audience or that target business engaged during those conversations. It's really not that complicated, but we'll cover that someday. So thus far with this subject, we've talked about purely economic development things. But aside from ED, I hope you've managed to tighten your circle in this, to tighten your engagement with those who mean the most to you around you. So that can be business relationships, that can be work relationships, that can be your family, to fortify those friendships, to learn more about yourself, and perhaps discover what you're really thankful for. And, very rarely in history do we have a number of months that have slowed down where we can actually contemplate some of this stuff. So dare I say, so I'm not going to say that COVID has been any sort of a blessing, because it's not. It's basically stomped on our country and huge chunks of the world over the past several months. So it's not a blessing at all, but it has provided us an opportunity to slow some things down and to look around, reevaluate, to retool, and to identify what we are thankful about. And at the center of all thankfulness is community. And the center of all economic development is community. No one should be going through life alone. We all need someone to help sharpen us, if you will, professionally and personally. We're wired for community, for shared experiences, just as much as we're wired toward individuality. Interestingly, in the Bible's account of creation, God goes through all these things through the first days of creation, where he creates lightness and darkness and land and the atmosphere and the oceans and fish and the animals and whatnot. And when he gets through all those things, he says, and it was good. But then he creates man. He creates Adam in the Bible's account. And so there's one guy. There's all this wonderful stuff that he said was good. And then there's one guy. And then God doesn't immediately go and say, and this man was good. This guy was good. Instead, he makes this guy amongst all these wonderful things, and then God decreed, it is not good for man to be alone. And then he creates Eve, and the creation of Eve was really to drive home the point that community is necessary. Economic development is necessary. Bonding your community is necessary. Bonding to your community is necessary. We're meant to share experiences, burdens, hope, and triumphs. And that's what that diatribe was about. So we don't know how long this COVID crap's going to last. We just don't. And you can cue the 2004 John Kerry, help is on the way, because a vaccine or three are apparently in the process of being produced and being tested and whatnot, and hopefully help is on the way. However, it's absolutely important that each of us take an inventory of the positives in 2020. We can't let ourselves or our communities simply be bogged down and mired in the tragedy and the horror and the misfortune that this garbage has brought us over the past 8+ months. In my life, personal story, have had some incredible experiences during this COVID period. Incredible experiences with my family, experiences of reconnection and realization and purpose, and I had a pretty serious health scare back in February, and I'm just glad to be alive. And it looks like I'm going to be around for a while, which is fantastic. But you know, the adverse side of that is maybe I'm not alive at this point. Maybe I wouldn't have made it. And if I didn't, I wouldn't get to experience any of these things that I've gotten to experience, you know, positives and negatives over this year. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. So what I'd encourage you to do is turn off the TV, turn off the political crap, you know, do something that sets your mind at ease. Take a break from all the hysteria and the hype and the stress and all that stuff that we're getting fed every single day by various sources, because that's all anybody wants to talk about. Read a book, not about politics, not about pandemics. Read a book, exercise, watch some sappy Hallmark movies, sit outside, look at the stars, and allow yourself to mentally drift somewhere else. And it's in those moments where we truly take a break from those stressors, where we truly take a break from the norm, we take a break from our careers and our jobs. Those are the moments in which creativity can truly flourish and we can expand our mindsets and who we really are. Lastly, I'm incredibly thankful for several things. My family, of course, my friends, my career, all that stuff. I'm incredibly thankful for a wonderful board of directors that supports me. I'm also incredibly thankful for the tens of viewers that we have at this point, which I truly anticipate that number is going to elevate and escalate and evolve as others find that there's not jack shit on YouTube relative to cognizant economic development stuff that keeps you awake while also keeping you informed and hopefully somewhat entertained. Anyway, I'm also thankful for you, of course. So next week, we'll be chatting with another economic development professional who has done great things in his community. I'm so excited to have him on the show. We'll talk about him next week. We'll have him here next week. And we'll talk about some of the high-tech stuff that he's done in his community in a very unique manner and approach that he has taken to taking a new role of an economic development agency that's been around for many years, several decades, but how he's put his spin on it and how very cool things are happening in that community. Until then, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and thank you so much. We'll see you next time on the Red Room Economic Development Show.